We're talking about the wedding day timeline, and basically, it's a document that is going to help you stay focused on wedding day. It's really the secret of keeping things simple on wedding day. And I'll tell you that one of the things that happens in the wedding business is that you've got a lot of different people, a lot of different experiences, and a lot of different personalities. And one of the ways to kind of focus everybody's attention on the same thing is by having a document that says, here's what we're going to do, and here's the order that we're going to do it in. And it's helpful to agree on that document and to agree on that process before the wedding day itself. So the timeline is really a tool that you use in conjunction with your couple to plan the day of the wedding from the moment that you arrive all the way until you load out. And you want to make sure that the other vendors are in agreement that that's in fact the order that you're going to go in. And you may also want to make sure that any other key players, so if the mother is playing a big role for the wedding, if, Aunt Josie is playing a big wedding, whoever, that they also agree that this timeline is the right order. And you can do that by leveraging your relationship with the couple. So you can say, hey, can you please run this by your mom or whoever else is an important person? Sometimes the bridesmaids take on a planning role, etc. But what you want to do is make sure that you have a document, that you have a clear, nicely designed document that says, here's what we're doing and here's the order that we're doing it in. So I have some supplemental materials that you can go through on your own time that go into more detail about what to think through in the ceremony, what to think through in the cocktail hour, and what to think through for the reception. But here are some kind of big takeaways about how the timeline works and why it's so important to make sure that it is a part of your DJ business. So it helps you and everybody else focus on what you're supposed to be doing. So everybody's got different opinions, but when you look at the piece of paper and you say, hey, is this how we're doing it? It gives you a more objective, concrete tool for discussing how the wedding day is going to go. Sometimes people say, well, I've done it this way. Well, that's great and all, but what are we doing today, and what works best for this venue? What works best for this couple and the requests that they have? And what's going to work best to make sure that we're all agreeing and that we're all in sync. So a lot of different things go into making a timeline, but there's not as many variations as you think. It doesn't have to be this super overwhelming document. It's actually pretty easy. So I'm going to include a couple examples in the supplemental material for this course that you can go through, that you can just look at. But what you need to know is that based on where you're located, so I don't know where you are. I don't know where you're listening from right now, but based on where you are, you're going to have different customs, traditions, and processes that work best for your area. So the area that I'm in, I have a lot of barns and kind of countryside weddings that we do. We have some mansions and some really nice kind of old but beautiful properties where we do weddings. And then we also do some weddings in kind of the country club vibe. And each of those has a very distinct flow and a distinct timeline that we follow depending on the caterers that I work with. So there's one catering company that I work with that we kind of have our system down pat. We've done so many weddings together that we don't even need to look at the document, although we always do, because we expect what's going to happen at a particular venue, and especially when we're working together. We've got a really great lockstep system in place. And you can consider developing those kinds of relationships, and how you do that is by having a very clear document that you send ahead of time. So some things to keep in mind: make sure you get the email addresses from the other vendors that you're going to be working with for the wedding, and go ahead and put all of those email addresses on the timeline. It makes it easy for yourself, but then as you send this timeline out, and as the bride or the groom sends this timeline out to everybody, all the other vendors are able to see the contact information as well, making it really easy to get in touch with everybody so the wedding is a success. And one of the lines I like to use is, hey, I want to make sure that this wedding is a success. Could you please review the timeline to make sure we're in agreement and that this is going to work out? And usually the photographer, the caterer, the venue will reply and say something like, Josh, looks great. Thank you so much for sending this over. And we all have an understanding of what's going to happen. So that is really how you want to think through the timeline. Is it's a tool for you to leverage before the event, so that on the day of the event, you're not worried about agreeing on whether or not these details are going to happen. It's also going to allow you to have a conversation over specific items. So the wedding day for the bride, for the groom, for the parents, for anybody who is not a vendor is often a very vague, ambiguous. It's a very mysterious, mystical dream that's going to happen, but they're not exactly sure how. And most people are getting married for the first or second time. There's a handful of folks that are getting married for the third and fourth time, but the majority of the people that you're going to work with are getting married for the first time or maybe the second time. So that means that they may have attended a few weddings, but they don't put on a lot of weddings. So take it from me, take it from other vendors that I've worked with and consulted with. What we do is pretty routine. What we do is kind of our own flavor, and it has to work with the caterer, it has to work with the photographer, it has to work with the venue. Those are the three big vendors that you want to make sure you're in step with when planning your timeline. Now, the videographer can often adapt. Usually the videographer is not going to make suggestions to the flow of the day because their goal is to capture the day, but the photographer can make adjustments to the flow of the day based on daylight, based on where guests are going to be located, whether or not a first look is happening, etc. So you can include all that information on the timeline. Most photographers are going to put together a timeline and a list of all the shots that they're going to be taking with the couple. So timing those out throughout the day is something that they're already thinking through. So you want to align your timeline with what they're thinking through as well, so that you're both playing off the same song sheet. So think about this from the perspective of music. When musicians or vocalists are harmonizing together, they're often singing the same piece of music. When you look at a choral group or an orchestra, every single person is actually playing off the same piece of music. They're all not playing different songs, but sometimes when you go into a wedding, one person has a timeline that says this, another person has a timeline that says that, and then maybe somebody else doesn't even have a timeline and they're not even sure what is going to be happening. So I want to encourage you to take control over the event, and by that what I mean is not be manipulative, don't be a megalomaniac, but take a position of leadership. Take a position of, here's what we're going to do, and what do you guys think? I think having that spirit of humility, but at the same time, a level of assertiveness is important. And you have to balance those two things, because if you're too assertive, you may come off as arrogant. And if you're too humble, you may come across as inexperienced or non-committed. So be thinking through how you can use the timeline as a conversation tool. So it's a great conversation tool with the vendors. It's also a great conversation tool with the couple. So as you're talking with them about what they want to happen at their wedding, you don't have to speak in dream language. You don't have to speak in conceptual language. You can talk very specifically about what time is the ceremony starting, and we're going to start the music about a half hour before that. What do you want that to sound like? And you're, instead of saying, I want the feel of my wedding day to be this, and that's helpful information that you can, keep notes of, but you're then able to say you're going to be playing Vitamin String Quartet, or you're going to be playing, some Bach concertos or whatever it is that you're going to play before the wedding, and you're going to have that down on paper. So when I talk through the wedding timeline with the couple over a Zoom call, or whether we meet up together in my office, what I'll often do is I'll have some music samples ready from some different genres. So we'll talk through the genres of what the ceremony might sound like. We'll talk through the genres of what they can expect for cocktail hour and dinner music. And then we'll go into what kind of dance vibe that they're looking for, so that we can kind of get those big genres written down as the overarching feel of the day. And then we can drill down into the actual events that are going to happen. So one thing that is sure, so you can mark my words on this, is that the times change, traditions change, and new events and things are going to come up in the future. You can mark my words, new traditions are going to come about. We're not going to do the bouquet toss forever, and I feel like right now it's on the way out, but there's still some people that do the bouquet toss, but then there's a lot of people that say, I didn't even know people do the bouquet toss anymore. So it's all going to depend on your area. It's going to depend on what year you're in and what the family is like. I did a Slovakian wedding years ago, so we did the kind of cleaning up of the broken plate on the dance floor, and that was a very special thing that the family wanted to happen. It's going to depend on the family. It's going to depend on the couple and their personality and what kind of event they want to happen. I wouldn't worry too much about having to figure out each and every event. So sometimes there's, the anniversary dance, there's the shoe game, there's the bouquet toss, there's the garter toss, there's all these things. It is helpful to learn those things when you need to do them. But my advice to you is going to be learn them on an as-needed basis. and I want to teach you how to learn these events. Here's how to learn an event when you're going to do one. Number one, look it up on YouTube and watch maybe 5 or 6 different weddings where they do that particular thing. So look up the shoe game on YouTube and watch 5 or 6 different ones. I don't think that you need to learn it right out of the bat, because in my past several years, I have not done the shoe game, and I'm not sure that I'm going to. Now, if somebody says to me next week, "Hey Josh, I'd like for you to do the shoe game for us at our wedding," I'm going to start looking it up, and the process that I'm going to follow is the same one that I would follow if I'm doing the bouquet toss for the first time, same process that I'll follow if I'm doing the anniversary dance for the first time, if I'm doing the apron dance for the first time, etc. So whatever it is that you're going to do for the wedding, think through how you can learn from 5 or 6 different people. Then what you want to do is think through the big processes in that event that you can outline on the timeline. So let's take the bouquet toss for example. The bouquet toss starts by inviting the single ladies onto the dance floor, and usually you're playing a song in the background. Sometimes it's Beyonce's All the Single Ladies or another song like that. So that step one is to invite all of the single ladies that are there onto the dance floor. The second step is to make sure that the bride has the bouquet and that she's standing with her back to all of the bridesmaids. So you make sure that the bride is there. You make sure that all of the bridesmaids and anybody who's unmarried is coming out to the dance floor for this. Then you're going to announce, "We're about to do the bouquet toss. Here's how it's going to work." And you explain to the guests, you explain over the microphone. The bride is going to throw the bouquet on 3, and whoever catches it, as the tradition goes, is the next person that will be married. And you don't have to throw that in there, but if you want to, you can. I say it sometimes, it gets a laugh. Sometimes I don't say it, and that's perfectly fine. But you want to explain that we're all going to count down on 3, and then the bride is going to throw the bouquet. So you give instructions. Then you're going to say, "All right, I'm going to need everybody's help for this. Let's all count down from 3, 2, 1. And everybody joins in with you, and then she throws the bouquet, and then somebody catches it. So you can list that out very simply with step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. And that way, if it's the first time that you're doing the bouquet toss, you don't have to worry about how to remember all of these things. You want to leverage the timeline. You want to leverage the document so that you don't have to use your memory, that you don't have to, try to have it all memorized in that moment. Now, over time, over doing it enough, you're going to have it memorized. You're going to know how the flow of these things goes. But especially as you're just starting out, you want to leverage the timeline as your tool for not having to remember everything. And you don't have to read it word for word when you're looking at your timeline, but you're using it to cue your brain, here are the steps that it has to happen. And you can do that as well for how to introduce everybody, how to make sure that guests know particular announcements about how the night is going to work together. So you want to leverage the piece of paper as your mind tool. It's really your mind on a piece of paper, and then making sure that everybody has that same mindset for how the night is going to go. So the timeline, it's an incredible tool. I have all the supplemental information in this lesson for you to go through to learn how to think through the ceremony, to learn how to think through the cocktail hour and the reception. But keep in mind, these things are going to change. Ceremonies are going to change. Cocktail hours are going to have different vibes. And I'm offering to you what I've learned over the years in each of these areas, but it's always going to be dependent on the couple that you're working with, the venue and their traditions, and based on your area of wherever you live and what is customary there. So the timeline, it's very important. I've got the templates here for you to use and steal and add your own branding to, and I'm very excited to just encourage you to use the timeline as a tool to make sure that the wedding day stays simple and straightforward. All right, we'll see you in the next lesson. I can't wait to see you there.